Hey, it's that Deadeye guy. Let's talk about BlizzCon 2017. BlizzCon kicked off this past week and I was fortunate enough to attend. This is my third time attending the event, so I had a pretty good idea about what to expect. Of all the cons I've been to, I have to say that BlizzCon is one of the most fun and best organized. While the scope is much more narrow than many cons, they still find a way to make sure that each hall is interesting and unique, with their own feel on things to see and do. With all that out of the way, let's get to the games and announcements this year. Well, it was another disappointing year for Diablo fans. While we did get the release of the Necromancer class from last year's BlizzCon, Diablo didn't get a single mention in the opening ceremony outside of simply acknowledging that the franchise exists. On the show floor, they had a demo area set up to show off a custom experience that was unique for attendees. It was essentially a custom-made rift with some fights in places you don't normally see mobs, like New Tristram. Diablo taunts you the whole time, and at the end you fight him with a retro-looking model that looks more like the Lord of Terror from the second game. All in all, a neat little experience that lasted about 10 minutes or so. Blizzard made a blog post back in October acknowledging that there would be no new announcements for Diablo this year. BlizzCon attendees would receive this Necro-Murky pet, and that's about all there was to say. I appreciate that they let fans know in advance that the game wouldn't be receiving any news. It tempered expectations early and jumped ahead of the inevitable wave of disappointment. The Necromancer class is still pretty fresh, and I freely admit that I haven't dived into the character as much as I have some of the other classes just yet. Seasons are still rolling on as usual, with some minor additions being put in here and there, but certainly nothing to write home about. It's still pretty disheartening to see the franchise that many Blizzard fans, myself included, discovered their games from, fall pretty clearly on the back burner of development priorities. Diablo is by far the most mature in tone of Blizzard franchises, and I hope that its reason for being set aside isn't that the mature audience is smaller and thus less profitable, or that it doesn't generate the kind of steady bottom line numbers that esports or subscription-based titles do. Here's hoping for something big next year. While there wasn't a whole lot of new content per se, it was announced that Starcraft II is going free to play. Starting November 14th, you'll be able to download Starcraft II via the Battle.net app, regardless if you had previously purchased it or not. Free content extends to having full access to ranked competitive online play, all co-op mode commanders up to level 5, and the first single-player campaign, Wings of Liberty. Those of us who own all three of the expansions will be gifted with a skin for Terran ghosts and additional player portraits. Yay! I think this is a great move to help foster the online competitive scene. Starcraft II is far and away the premier competitive real-time strategy game, and it continues to be extremely popular in many different markets. Offering competitive ladder play for free will only increase that popularity. There doesn't seem to be content coming down the pipe outside of additional co-op commanders, and I didn't see any hints of additional expansions or lore-focused campaigns coming out. It seems for the moment that StarCraft will be focusing solely on cooperative missions and ranked competitive play. World of Warcraft got the biggest news of the day, despite being wholly expected. Blizzard announced the Battle for Azeroth expansion with a content trailer and the absolutely stunning opening cinematic. I thought it would be tough to top last year's Legion cinematic, but man did they outdo themselves. It really feels like reaching back to classic Warcraft. Alliance vs Horde duking it out on the battlefield. Neither faction was favored, and both were shown to be the powerful force that they are in the story. It was an absolutely fantastic cinematic that we have come to expect from Blizzard. I am curious to see where the story for WoW goes, as the new expansion seems to be focusing on world faction-based PvP. Legion is still running, and at the moment, Sargeras and his army of demons are still a massive threat to Azeroth. Defeating him will be no small task or quick content update, as he will be the first Titan that players will directly interact with in-game. From now until then, the Legion presumably is defeated and things go back to normal. However, despite working together to end a threat to the entire world, the Alliance and Horde decide to go back to killing each other full-time again. So much for making up our differences. I have reasons to be skeptical of some of Blizzard's writing. I'm not sure I'll ever fully get over how Starcraft II ended. Hopefully the WoW team has a good story in place to transition players from battling our demonic foe to once again battling each other on a grander scale. On the show floor, the WoW demo allowed you to playtest either the questing or dungeon experience in the new expansion. Both demos were pretty much what we've come to expect, and I can't say I was surprised by anything I saw. The new Alliance Zone looked a bit like the Pacific Northwest Wilderness, with some pirate themes thrown in. I can't help but think that the WoW team is keeping their cards fairly close to their chest for these demos because of how little new things there was to see. Last year we got the introductory Demon Hunter mission, which was extremely unique and interesting. The exact opposite can be said for the Battle of Azeroth floor demos. Some of the new features are curiously small and ambiguous. Amulets that level and change with your character seem to be replacing the artifact weapons from Legion. The developers confirmed at the Q&A that there is a plan in place to gracefully phase out said artifact weapons in lieu of the new neck pieces. The new expansion will include the ability to build and maintain bases, much in the same vein as old-school Warcraft real-time strategy. Players will gather resources, create buildings, and send minions against each other, except now the player is on the battlefield as well. Interesting mechanic, but that was about the biggest feature that I picked up on from the talks. Hopefully there's far more to be announced. There's a rumor that the last major content patch for Legion has already dropped. This is especially worrying as many longtime players remember Warlords of Draenor and Pandaria, where the window of time between the last content patch and the new expansion was excruciatingly long. This caused a lot of players to burn out and cancel subscriptions. Blizzard obviously doesn't want that to happen as Legion comes to a close, so I'll be curious to see precisely how close Battle for Azeroth is to launching. I also want to mention the Warcraft diorama that was set up on the show floor. It now holds the world record for biggest video game diorama. Not only is the diorama itself ridiculously awesome, but all of the figures that make up the Alliance and Horde armies are each individually a 3D print of attendees' characters. You can look up your highest WoW character to see if they made the cut on the diorama's website. My Death Knight is on the field for the Alliance, and that's pretty damn cool. Admittedly, Hearthstone is the Blizzard title I play the least. Ben Brode's announcement of the new Kobolds and Catacombs expansion was one of the more charming presentations of the opening ceremony. Brode is already a pretty charismatic guy, but involving the crowd in a little mini tabletop dungeon run was a pretty neat idea for demonstrating the theme of the new set. The two big highlight features are the addition of the legendary weapons cards for all heroes, and the new single-player expansion arena-style dungeon runs. The latter of the two is particularly interesting to me as a fairly casual player. I enjoy the single-player experiences that have been released in previous sets, but once you run through them once, there really isn't much replayability. The dungeon runs have randomization to make each experience somewhat unique, and best of all, they'll come free to all Hearthstone players, no purchase of the new set required. Heroes of the Storm continues to roll out new characters, and they announced some pretty significant systems changes coming in 2018. Hanzo and Alexstrasza were announced in a pretty sweet cinematic showing them duking it out on castle battlements. I didn't get to play Alexstrasza, which is great because at the time of this recording, she's currently playable on the PTR. I did get in a few games with Hanzo in the demo area, and I have to say that the Heroes team did a pretty great job bringing his skill set and play feel over from Overwatch into the MOBA setting. He is a sustaining damage type assassin that can throw out some occasional bursts with well-placed scatter arrows and dragon strikes. The Stormbow ability feels great to use, and the low cooldown means you can be constantly slinging out some decent damage from a safe distance. I'm just sad that there's no ability to aim a scatter arrow directly at the feet of enemy heroes for the instant kill like there is in Overwatch. Maybe they'll add that later in the future. The big patch in 2018 looks like it's going to overhaul quite a few things. The first and most welcome will be the expanded camera. Currently, players have a pretty close down view of the battlefield, and that means that you have to keep a close eye on the minimap to truly have an idea of what's going on around you. Blizzard recognized this and looks to be pulling out the camera a bit so that the minimap isn't required viewing to be able to stay aware of your immediate surroundings. Stealth is getting a rework, but there hasn't been many details released about what exactly they're doing with it. Right now, spotting stealth characters means staring hard at your monitor hoping to spot their phased outline. I'm not sure if they're going to remove the phasing effect altogether or replace it with something else. It'll be interesting to see the changes that come down the pipe. Laning is also getting some changes. Towers will no longer have a finite number of ammunition, and outer keeps will not have an accompanying tower with them behind the initial wall. These tweaks are being implemented to make the laning phase of the game just a tad longer and make it difficult to swarm lanes early with minions. The last big change is the addition of a matchmaking system. This is certainly a welcome change for me as a fairly casual Heroes player who primarily sticks to quick matches. I'd say it's about a 50-50 between legitimately good, balanced games versus being skill stacked heavily for or against me. That means every other game I'm going to get into a match where I get curb stomped, or a game where there is no actual competition and we handily win. Hopefully this system balances that out and makes for more interesting and fair games, even in quick match. The big news for Overwatch was the new support character Moira and the new hybrid map Blizzard World. This new map is modeled as a Blizzard version of a certain popular Southern California theme park that the Blizzard execs were very careful not to actually mention by name, lest the mouse come hunting for blood and lawsuits. I played Moira a few times in the demo area, and I can definitely say that she's not easy to just pick up and play. She's going to take some serious practice to be an effective support pick, but I like her overall kit. The Biotic Orb has a lot of utility and can be used to help the team push or break enemy lines. Biotic Grasp is her primary ability for dealing damage and healing, and it can be difficult to get the hang of, but I'd wager it will quickly acquire disdain among the player base, a la Symmetra's microwave no-aim cancer gun. Fade is great for getting in and out of combat when needed, and to top it all off, she Naruto runs and has a shield-piercing Kamehameha ult that heals friendlies and damages enemies. All in all, she's a very interesting character and is currently playable on the PTR. Blizzard World is fantastic from what little I saw of it. There's a lot of Easter eggs for longtime Blizz fans to enjoy, and it will definitely be fun to run around and check out all the references carefully placed all over the map. The only complaint that I have is that it's a bit claustrophobic. Very little of the map is open, with lots of nooks and hallways to lurk in. Not really a criticism of the map itself, but more acknowledging my own preferences on the types of maps I like to play. Blizzard also announced a slew of new crossover legendary skins to go along with Blizzard World's launch, representing characters from all of the other Blizzard franchises. Again, longtime Blizz fans like myself were ecstatic. That Butcher Roadhog skin will be an immediate purchase for me once it releases. On the esports side, I had a chance to sit in the Overwatch arena to watch the World Cup final. The arena itself was quite spectacular, and the setup gave a great experience as a fan and spectator. Most of the audience were confident that once France and US were defeated, no one was going to be able to stop South Korea. Canada made a valiant effort in the finals, but it was pretty obvious that South Korea was going home with the win. I'm looking forward to Overwatch League as I'm a huge fan of traditional sports, and Overwatch as a game. Seeing that kind of money and backing behind a real esport that I love playing will be quite a spectacle. Maybe next year someone can knock off South Korea, but I'm not hopeful. Here's hoping Overwatch League has a great first season when it kicks off in January. BlizzCon 2017 closed out with a performance by Muse. I admit that I don't really listen to them, and I've only really heard their big hits. I was in line at Heroes when they took the stage over in the main hall, and holy hell can those guys put on a show. We could hear it from a few halls down, and I think most of us in line that were watching the monitor started to regret not being over there to get good seats and see the show in person. Knights of Sidonia was freaking epic, and they even brought up some of the cosplayers to jam out as they played. It was without a doubt a solid choice for the con's closing act. Go see Muse live, you won't regret it. The party continued out in the quad around the food trucks and in the lobby of the Hilton once the conference floor closed down. There's loud music and drinks down in the hotel lobby, setting a very club-like scene with lots of mingling and drunk Blizzard fans. I couldn't be bothered to join in as I cannot stand being able to not hear who I'm talking to. Instead, I went upstairs to have a couple of drinks with the people I attended the con with and got some sleep. Thankfully, my room was far enough away from the craziness that the thumping music wasn't heard through the walls. While you probably can't say that this was a big year for Blizzard announcements, the event was still a hell of a lot of fun, and it's always cool to get a chance to mingle with Blizzard employees and fans alike. This year was definitely more focused on esports, especially in preparation of the upcoming Overwatch League, and I still look forward to seeing how it pans out over the next few months. So ends BlizzCon 2017. Thanks for watching. If you like content like this, why not like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.